Hello, everyone, wherever you are in the world today. I'd like to welcome you all to the LIBER webinar entitled Open Science Skilling and Training Programs Across Europe. Today's webinar is focused on a project conducted by LIBER's Digital Skills Working Group, where they surveyed and interviewed experts across Europe to identify examples or case studies of good practice in open science skilling programs and initiatives. My name is Ciara McCaffrey. I'm the host of today's webinar. I am the Deputy Librarian at the University of Limerick in Ireland, and I'm the co-chair of LIBER's Digital Skills Working Group. Now, we had planned on having 4 presentations today, but unfortunately we received word this morning that the presenters from the University of Oslo, Hanne and Ellen, are unfortunately unable to attend due to a health issue. We send them our very best wishes, and their slides and the case study are available on Zenodo for anyone who is interested in finding out more about the example from Norway. This means that we will have 3 presentations today, starting with an introduction to the case studies project by Cecile Swiatek from the LIBER Digital Skills Working Group. And we will then hear from Katrine Doring Davidson, who will speak about open science skilling across research libraries in Denmark. And our final speaker, Jonathan England, will present the example from the University of Luxembourg. Just some notes on housekeeping today. The webinar is being recorded. All participants will receive a link to the recording. Slides are available on Zenodo, and we'll post the link to that in the chat box. Attendees, you're all muted and your cameras are off, but you can ask some questions as we go along by putting them in the chat box. We will handle questions at the end when all speakers have completed their presentations, and we'll have some questions and some discussion at that stage. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker. Cecile Swiatek is co-chair of LIBER's Digital Skills for Library Staff and Researchers Working Group. And she is very much the lead and the coordinator of the project to survey and gather open science skilling examples across Europe. She'll speak for a few minutes about the project. So over to you, Cecile, and just a reminder to switch on your camera and your mic.
Hi all. Thank you, dear Ciara. Well, the LIBER Working Group, Digital Skills for Library Staff and Researcher, has been active since summer 2018, and its work is oriented toward fostering open science skilling programs in higher education institutions and networks, bringing helpful support, but also a space for exchanging practices and discussing training issues, sharing ideas. So we are aiming at helping colleagues define their priorities for building open science skilling and training programs in their institutions, but also for integrating these programs into the institutional strategy. Same time at the strategic level and into the lab's daily routine activities. So a range of events was set up, amongst which webinars, publication, workshops, and the Zotero library. And you will be able to collect the web links in the chat box, but also in the presentation. So maybe first, before we start for this overview of the open science case reviews, let's have a word about the working group working context. There is a pluriannual LIBER strategy that is implemented, and within this strategy, LIBER published an open science roadmap. And this had been essential for shaping our work. And you will discover the links. So we had 3 dimensions in our activities. The first one is today's topic, collecting selected cases for open science training programs across Europe, publishing them, and publishing an analysis and fact sheet. And this will be for this summer, so I'm teasing a bit. The second thing was collecting useful references and organizing them, because you can be an expert, but you can be also a beginner in creating an open science skilling program. And you need to have some references already collected, organized to help you with this. So we created digital skills for open science Zotero library with the papers, another folder with recommended training resources with input from all LIBER working groups, skills lists and frameworks, because many frameworks exist for digital skills and literacy skills, and the last folder is about training materials, so you will find the links later. The third direction was bringing into visualization the path you can create into digital skills, open science skills. So a group headed by Kira made a visualization and created a poster presented in an open science conference in Berlin this year. And this visualization was organized following the LIBER Open Science Roadmap key points. And it took some time to compare existing frameworks and proposing this as an entry point into skilling. So today we are going to focus on the case studies that we collected across Europe. As you can see, both for researchers and for library staff, we wanted to focus on the importance of training programs for heading towards knowledge openness and especially open science skills. So we conducted a selection process in 2018 in order to identify throughout Europe major cases, emerging initiatives that rely on skills identification. Because overall, our working group is trying to spread a more open culture, and it goes through cases. In April 2019, we sent questionnaires to 28 countries, and complementary interviews were made and conducted through video conferences, phone calls, a bit like today. And the objective of this activity is to offer the LIBER participants, like today, but the whole community, inspiring methods, practices, contacts also, and words of wisdom from other experiences. Those experiences we collected are covering institutional cases most of the time, but also a few national initiatives and European project approaches. So this project displays the richness and diversity of European approaches toward open science skilling and training in both library and researchers' communities. A first presentation of this achievement was made in 2019 during the LIBER conference in Dublin through a workshop called Open Science Essentials Toward a Skill Set and Showcase. So you will find the link. And the publication of the whole case studies should be ready by a week or so. On the DOI you can see here. It will be all available. 5 are remaining, but almost ready. And the publication of the full analysis will happen in this year, summer 2020, hopefully for the conference. So these are the countries that answered positively through our because we requested their input, and those are the countries who accepted to be published. Because some cases, some answers we received were not published because people didn't want to. They wanted to give us some insight, but they didn't want to go public. This is the collection we have. Usually it's one per country. For 2 countries, the Netherlands and Spain, we have 2 cases. So let's have a look at the major outputs we have. How do we work when we are reaching our audience? Those selected cases learned what we can already know is that the first target are researchers and PhDs. And we can see that it's almost half-half between, it's almost equal between researchers and PhD public. Reaching for an audience of researchers also goes through reaching early career researchers. They used formats that was done before COVID-19, show that face-to-face is the most efficient way for training for open science skills, especially for beginners, and also for experts who need places where they can exchange on their practices. We will see how it will evolve in the future, but still, there can be a proximity effect, maybe. And they use channels and learning types where mainly direct things through presentations, but blended formats do exist and they are used. If we look at the priorities, so this table is not easy to read, but what we can see is that scholarly publishing skills are really, with the FAIR data, are the main ones that appear from those case studies. And the exclusions, citizen science and research integrity, were explained because of the schedule and calendars. Priorities goes first to scholarly publishing, FAIR data. Metrics and rewards come later. And citizen science and research integrity are big priorities, but they come later in time in the programs. Benefits and reward are an issue, yes, of course, especially for PhDs and young researchers, but also for library staff and research support staff. For researchers, it's a bit different because for the moment, the incentives in the careers are not clear to everyone. And this is one of the major challenges we are facing because the trainings need to be aligned to the institutional strategy, of course, to library services activities, what we provide as a support for research and education. And also, it has to be in line with the career management for researchers. If peer reviewing is important and at the heart of the career, as long as it is linked to publishing, not openly and freely through the open science criteria, well, the trainings can't follow that because we don't meet the interest, the direct and first interest of the researchers. This is what comes out of it. So it needs to be formal for staff and young researchers more than everything. I will stop here, but I can take any questions any way you wish. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecile. So we'll take questions all together at the end, but do please post them in the chat box for Cecile. Our second presenter is Katrine Doering-Davidson, Project Manager for Aarhus University Library, who will present an upskilling program based in Danish research libraries. So over to you, Katrine. I see you have your camera on, and I'm sure that you have your mic on too.
Thank you, Kiera, and thank you for inviting me. I will be telling you a bit on this project on open science skills in Danish research libraries. The project was funded by the Denmark's Electronic Research Library, and with the aim to investigate and model and deploy open science skills for Danish research librarians. So today I'll be outlining the project's conceptual model and a 7-step model on that includes a qualification framework to rationalize how we get from services to skills. And finally, I will run through one of the main outcomes of the project, which is a matrix of open science competencies and skills in research libraries. So, yeah. Just a few facts. The project ran from 2018 and has just ended. And there were 6 research libraries involved. It was the Copenhagen Business School, the Royal Library, the Technical University Library of Denmark, University Library of Southern Denmark, via University College, and the Library for Architecture, Design, Conservation, and Performing Arts. So altogether, we were 20 project members. In the beginning, we talked a lot about whether to call it open research or open science. I guess today we all, there's a consensus on calling it open science. But we had this model where we, in the center of the research life cycle, we find the user or the researcher. It was very important for us to base the user in the center of the service development, and that the services was based on their needs. The next layer was the tools and infrastructure. Then comes library services. And then the last layer, the outer layer, was policies and principles. Now, first of all, I won't go into all these layers, but first of all, this is a static representation of the research process. And of course, in reality, there will be a lot of interactions and a more dynamic process in the research. So secondly, the model does not explain how to translate and identify open science services into relevant competencies and skills, but we will come back to that. Just to zoom in a bit on the core, as I said, it was important for us to note that the user is placed in the center of the service development. In this model, the user moves through 3 different phases: planning, active research, and publishing phase. And we identified several activities and actions that often requires some support. Since we've started, the landscape of open science has changed a bit, but it's still valid to say that digital infrastructure determines the research work and the support services needed. Some service in the libraries are extremely well developed, and this could be, an example could be information retrieval. But other services are under development. Data documentation, data publishing, and stuff like this. Now the 7-step model we used, I'll just jump to explaining that model. So within the project, we did a literature review where we attempted to investigate and explain how to get from services to competencies. And we gathered the theory and empirical knowledge in this strategic tool to identify service competencies and skills. You can see the model here on the screen. Maybe it's a bit difficult to read, but I hope you can see it well. Well, we did that because we found that one of the challenges is to align services with the local requirements and search culture, combined with the extent on how quickly the library can react to the dynamics of the university it serves. Some needs for support services develop very quickly, and others, such as policy development and implementation, develop at a much slower rate. The libraries find themselves at the tipping point between supporting existing research cultures and predicting which methods and tools they need to invest in over the coming years. So central for our review was how to strategically develop skills that support a rational portfolio for services. The two models I just introduced was the foundation for three main outcomes of the project, namely the competence model, the training catalog, and development program. I will say a bit more about the competence model in a second, but just to say the inspiration training catalog, it contains information on links to e-learning courses, webinars, and so on within open science and digital literacy, and is structured as the competence model. So it can be used in conjunctions to or with the model. It's a picture of what's out there at the moment, and therefore we expect it will be outdated pretty soon, but still we believe it can be useful for those who want to take on this work right away. Now the development program was actually 2 workshops. It should have been 3 workshops, but it came down to 2 because of the current situation. So the first workshop was on digital collections and how to access them, and the tools needed to do that. And the second workshop was on research data management. The third should have been on open science training, because we found that soft skills like teaching in tech was also an issue when it comes to promoting open science and the support function that we have in the libraries. Yeah. So just to have a quick look at the competence model, it's a matrix with 11 areas of competence and the qualification framework on 3 levels. And you can see them here on the left on the slide. On the right is the actual matrix that we did. I know you cannot read this. It's also in Danish if it was big enough, but it's not. But still, the 11 areas is outlined in the yellow on the left in the matrix, and the 3 different shades of yellow illustrates the 3 phases: planning, active research, and publishing. Now the qualification framework goes from basic to advanced, and will be found in the gray area of the matrix. Now the different knowledge and skills and competencies needed in the area on a specific level is then described in each cell. Yeah. So I've just made a small example of how the matrix can be used, and then the usage is actually 2-folded. But this example, we use the model strategically in developing services in the library. And this is just an example. It's not real. But let's say that the service on data management planning is currently on level 1 or 2. And the management wants to increase that. Maybe the same with data archiving and data publishing. Then they can use the matrix to see what we suggest what we suggest that this requires. And just as another example, maybe the copyright and licenses level is at 1, and maybe the management find that this is sufficient, so they don't want to do anything there. but it's just to illustrate how the matrix can be used. Now, the other way that I would suggest that you could use this matrix is on a more personal level. If I, as a staff, needed to take on a new task or just wanted to be updated on some of these areas, I could use the matrix to identify skills and competencies needed to do that. And I could then use the training catalog I just mentioned to find actually e-learning webinars that could help me gain the skills and competencies needed. So yeah, just to sum up challenges and supports, challenges and successes. Well, the complexity of open science, what to bring into the model and what to leave out were time-consuming and hard work. But also the open science is evolving very fast, and there's a lot of initiatives. So of course we wanted to stay on top of this and be aligned with the fields to stay relevant. So that was some of the challenges. Talking about successes, well, now the project has come to an end. I think it's very clear to me that we have had a huge boost among the project members. We have delivered several, in my opinion, very concrete and useful outcomes, which I'm very proud of. And of course, now it's up to the management of the Danish research libraries to bring them into the library and actually use these tools that we've conducted. So I think we provided a nice framework for further training and skilling activities in the Danish research libraries. So I don't have much more to say, but everything is in Zenodo. So if you want to know more, you can look there. Some of the files are in Danish, but you're welcome to contact me for further information. Yeah, thank you.
So thank you very much, Katrine. And our final speaker is Jonathan England, advocate for scholarly communication and research process at the University of Luxembourg. So over to you, Jonathan.
So hello, everyone. I'm going to take you on a journey that we organized at the University of Luxembourg that was me trying to find a way to make learning about open science practices in a more informal way. So this came at, we organized this activity at the same time as we organized a 3-day conference that we did at the university called the Open Science Forum. And I really wanted to try and find a way to engage more other types of users of the library. So library users like the bachelor's and master's students, for instance, but also my colleagues, the librarians that don't necessarily know much about open science, research support staff, but also in a sense the early career researchers and senior researchers that were attending the event. So the aim was really to try and find a way to make open science practices in a kind of gamified activity to learn through an informal way. And because the visual identity, let's say, of the Open Science Forum was quite colorful, I went for something a bit more retro futurist type of look. So what we did was to scatter information throughout the library. So our library at the University of Luxembourg is it has 5 floors, and the idea was to, so in kind of each floor, to have some kind of information there, and also to have this activity that you could do to gain more information. There were a few things that was really important to us, is that we don't have any staff member on top to help with this activity. So it had to be independent. So we put this, what I call the Open Science Voyager Pack, at the entrance of the library, and so people could find information about what the quest was for the 2 weeks it was on. It has all the explanation on it. It had the boxes to fill in, and the map where to find all the information. We try to also attract people in organizing the events by offering them free pencils, and it's those ones that from sprouts that you can actually plant, so they have seeds on the back. So it was trying to find ways to attract people engaging in the activity. So we focus on 6 main topics, and I'll come back to that a bit later in how the afterthoughts of having organized the event. But we decided for the university to focus on 6 main topics, which was open access, persistent identifiers, publish or perish problem, the open licenses, finding and reusing data, and open source softwares. And so for each of those activities, we had some info points. So there was some information displayed. So for instance, you had the PhD Comics What is Open Access video. I don't know if you've seen it. It's a very good video for the open access. So it was on a loop with subtitles. We had a whiteboard for the open source softwares where people could engage and mention what kind of open source softwares they knew about. So it had some information, and then on top of that, the quest. So the whole point of the activity was it to be information points, but also the quest. And the quest consisted of 2 questions that they had to find the information of, and I'll explain that in a few seconds. And then 1 task, 1 activity that they could do to engage a bit more, but that wasn't required. At the end, if they finished everything, they would hand in to the librarian. So that was the only participation of my colleagues. And it was to hand in the prize, which was a power bank, because we had some leftovers from the conference. And this diploma. So it's, again, this prize to try and to attract people in participating in the activity. Because if if you've already organized events, it's generally quite difficult to attract people. And in Luxembourg, because open science is not yet such a well-known subject, it's more difficult to attract. So it's those tiny things that do help get more people. So types of activities that we did. The way I created it was trying to find different ways so that to keep it, keep it dynamic, keep it entertaining, so that it's not always looking for the information on the boards and then you get that information. So some of them was like that. So for instance, for the open access, and you have it on the right hand side of the screen, the question about planets. So we had the 10 principles of planets printed out and was there. And the question was, what is the document released on the 4th of September 2018 that created such a bombshell in the academic publishing landscape? This question, surprisingly, at the time, so it was in November 2019 that 2018 that we did it. Very, very few researchers knew about it. So it was actually a good way to make researchers aware of that. This questions, for instance, was more tailored towards researchers rather than students. But it was trying to find different ways of catering for all these different audiences. Other tasks included solving mini puzzles. I'll show you one just in the next slide, using web tools and social media. So for instance, I was trying to have people engage through Twitter or even Facebook through the hashtag Open Science Quest. and even find one of the answers on a tweet that I did on Twitter. Surprisingly, and I don't know if it's, again, something unique to Luxembourg, but we didn't have any or much, just a couple engagements with this social media, even if more people actually did the quest. Another activity was to ask people, so we had this very simple display of having a whiteboard, and people could just write down open source softwares that they knew about. Instead of us giving the answer, people can share about their open source softwares that they're using. And each of those displays were put at strategic places within the library. So so open source softwares was more linked to the softwares type of coding books. Luckily enough, we only had one drawing and no swear words or anything. So that depends on your audience, obviously, but we were lucky in that sense. Engagement with using web tools. So, for instance, Sherpa Romeo that we use a lot, obviously. It's what I found in the presentation when I talk about I give this presentation usually about the myths and misconceptions about open access. I talk about Sherpa Romeo, but then people don't really, they forget from one time to another. So instead of just saying, this is information, Sherpa Romeo exists, one of the questions required you to go on Sherpa Romeo and find the embargo period of a specific journal so that you actually use it instead of just being mentioned. The one that I'm most proud of and I really like is that I created this fake article which has no persistent identifier, so no ORCID ID attached to an author. And so I was in this hypothetical scenario where you have an author named James Smith. You have to find where that author is, and obviously the email address, because that researcher moved from university, and you find a lot because it's a common name. So I asked them to move to a different place of the library and go to a different dimension, because that's the theme of the quest. And so on this alternative dimension, you had ORCID IDs attached to the name. So you could go on ORCID, and I created those fake ORCID IDs and see, okay, it's that James Smith that is at this university. So it was a very practical way of showcasing the usefulness of having of persistent identifiers in general, but in this case, specifically ORCID. So there are some key points that I want to highlight. So this is a very quick overview, but of course, if you have more questions, don't hesitate. So what we really wanted was to have an independent and engaging learning activity. So it had to be independent in the sense that no librarians, so no staff members had to, so they were there if there were any questions, obviously, but they weren't required actively to run the quest, and that was very important. It had to be engaging because we know, I mean, I'm the worst learner for that because I get bored very quickly. So I'm actually a good, I always put myself through the activity to think, okay, will I get bored very quickly with this or not? So you could, so the idea was also to have support of very different ways of learning goals. So you could grasp a minimum concepts by just reading through the boards, answering the quest, and just going and finish it in 20 minutes. Or you could spend more time because a lot of the information was not required within the quest, but the information was still there. So I know that a PhD student spent 2 hours on the quest because she went through all she really went through in depth of all the displays. So that was a real point. A PhD student is not the same audience as a bachelor or master student that just wants an overview of what open science is. So standard displays, so meaning that even if you didn't do the quest, you could actually just read about it. So you're in the you're learning about you see the display about open source softwares or open licenses, and then you just read through the boards and you're like, oh, interesting, but you don't actually have to do the quest to get some information. So that was also important because not every time has time to spend on quest, but you can still get some information. Mix of information gathering techniques, that was important also from a point of view of the students, because it is a skill that the library is supposed to provide in terms of the students of how to search for information. So using different types of information gathering techniques on the display, or online search, social media was a good way also of indirectly and teach that through a gamified activity. For us also, the very, very important thing was that it was shareable, adaptable, that anyone can reuse it and build upon. So obviously, I will mention at the end, but all the resources and materials are available. So yes, that was the idea, is that it's just not a one-off thing, is that we tried it, there was some things that worked, something that didn't, and then we can build upon. Some of the suggestions that I would have for other institutions, and I think that under the current the situations with COVID-19, it's something that I already had the idea, but it would be even more interesting, is engaging through the digital use of the technology. Because we know that younger generations, so bachelor and master students, will engage more easily if it's just through a mobile device instead of pen and paper, for instance. So it depends on your audience, obviously, and that's very important to take into account. But there's an example of an app called Action Band, which allows you to do a scavenger hunt type of activity across the city or across the campus. So it's something that we're looking into to try and even do this. So I know my colleagues are now doing it within the library, so that you can discover the library on your own. Because of social distancing, it's an important, we can't do group visits anymore. So it's something that is being considered. I believe that it's like when you organize an event and you have food to attract people with a price. It's stupid, but it's like that. Obviously, adapt your topics, materials, and activities depending on the audience. You need to know, and you best know your audience, and you need to adapt that. I really think that people learn in different ways. So, for instance, I learned through moving, and I think that if you put all of the activities in the same place, people will learn less efficiently or will get bored more quickly. So having something dynamic, so it could be physically by within a library, for instance, in different places, but it could just be something as, and something I had not considered before COVID-19 was so we're talking about space dynamic, but it could be time dynamic. So you could engage people through social media over every day, having a nugget of knowledge or something like that. So it could be something dynamic also through time. And I think, as I also believe that collaborative activities, so something as simple as a whiteboard and asking people to provide their knowledge, it's I organize those type of activities, but I'm by no way an expert of absolutely all the dimensions of open science. So some people might know of a lot of things that we're not aware of, and that is the importance of this kind of activity, is not giving knowledge to people, but also engaging so that people can share their own knowledge about a topic, and that's, I think, really important. So if you're interested in reading a bit more, there's created a blog post about it. I created a poster, and this presentation is also on Zenodo, on top of being on the LIBER blog, Zenodo page. all the materials are available on Zenodo also. They're all in CC0 because the whole point is for you to just use it, because if we start crediting, it becomes a bit hard. I think the only thing I put in CC BY was the document explaining, but the rest is just, please do share, please do reuse, please do adapt, create your own open science quest. And the idea also is I created an open science quest community page on Zenodo. So if you do create your own, it doesn't even have to use the same type of visuals, but if you do organize this type of gamified activities, let's share it so that other people can reuse and share. And if you have any questions, I think we're yes, this is more or less the end of my presentation. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan, for a very interesting talk. And my thanks to all the speakers for their presentations today. It's now time for participants to ask questions, and many have been coming in the chat box, and for some discussion from the panel speakers. So if the speakers are ready, I'd invite them to switch on their cameras and their mics. I'll keep my camera off so that I can sort through the questions. And the first question was directed at Katrine, a question from Emma, a member of the EOSC working group on training skills, who was curious about the training catalogue. Did you design a specific catalogue for training resources with specific metadata? They are discussing the specification for the EOSC training resource catalogue and are very interested in this aspect.
Yes, we did design a specific catalog, and you can find it on Zenodo. The metadata is combined with the competency model, but still, the two documents will go together and explain metadata, links, and stuff. Yeah, is that the answer?
I think so, Katrine.
Yeah.
Just another question for you, Katrine, before I move to Jonathan's questions. Who participated in elaborating the skills matrix and who participated in the training catalogue?
The project group. We did several internal workshops on and did this. So it was a long process, but I will say the whole project group was involved.
Okay, thank you, Katrine. For Jonathan, somebody is asking about the engagement rate.
Yes, so it's something I didn't mention because we had between, if I'm not mistaken, between 30 and 50, but more 30, which seems very low, but for Luxembourg was actually, we were really happy. To give you a comparison to the Open Science Forum, so the 3-day event that with I think there was 12 speakers, international speakers. We had in total 50 different people that came. So the engagement rate in Luxembourg is very, very low. It's something that I learned the hard way. So I wouldn't use Luxembourg as a representation of how well the quest could work in other places. But for those who did do the quest, however, we had very good feedback, and that PhD student who spent 2 hours on the quest actually asked me to talk to me to say how happy she was with this kind of quest. So
thank you. I have a couple of questions, Jonathan, about the language. What language was chosen for the contents, and is it available in other languages?
So Luxembourg has this very unique situation where a lot of different languages are spoken. So English, French, German, Luxembourgish, Portuguese. So you have a lot of different options. We decided to stick to English for most of the resources. Some of them are in French because the resources that were more tailored to the students were more in French and in German sometimes. But the quest is in English. Obviously, if you have if you create translations of anything, please do share it on the community page.
Okay, thank you. I have a question for Jonathan, but I'm interested in asking everyone. So we might start with Jonathan and then maybe Katrine and Cecile. How has COVID-19 and the current crisis we find ourselves in, how has it changed things for your training program? How have you had to adapt, or how might you adapt?
I would say that I've always been interested in going digital, so try to make it more digital. So I don't want to say that COVID-19 has been a nice thing, because it's not, but it's kind of forcing the way we do it to be more creative, which is something I personally enjoy a lot, which is finding new ways of engaging with people. So I've been trying to think about different ways of even doing, the talks that I give in live, to give webinars, for instance, is something that wasn't done as much, but is becoming more and more common. And it's, I think, something people like, because they don't actually need to go anywhere, and it's easy, and you just stay in front of your computer, which for a lot of PhD students is sometimes, this question of time. They don't have much time, and so yes, it's in that sense, it's been positive, I would say. But yeah.
Yes, thank you. Cecile, what are your thoughts on COVID-19 and open science skilling?
Well, if we refer to the answers we gathered through the survey and the interviews, we saw that blended learning and distant learning were either some experimentation done or some current practice. For those currently practicing distant learning or blended learning, moving to COVID-19 was not that difficult, because the digital gap was not ahead of them. They were just in the middle of it. The question was, who can access, and how can we face massive learners? For those who tried and experimented massive or even small but distant learning and decided to abandon this for fostering more face-to-face experience, maybe that was a little harder, but I think all of us thought at one moment about experiencing distant learning with the researchers, because they work in different labs abroad. They move all day long and all night long. They move around the world. So COVID-19 was the moment where you could reactive, can you say that in English? I don't know. Reignite these possibilities, but I'm not sure, and history will tell us, but I'm not sure this will be that big shift that some people are presenting, like we are all going online forever and that will be fantastic. Because we can see, as soon as a country opens a window, everyone jumps in the street and we rub against each other. So it means that COVID-19 was a good lab, or this will be, do not misinterpret what I say, but ironically, it has been the perfect opportunity to test our distant pedagogical skills, and to test and go further with students and with researchers in our soft skills and competencies. For example, I could see that in different countries, groups opened living rooms, and not meeting rooms, but living rooms for opening discussions about skilling, training, what is open science, scholarly publication. There was a big trend for developing data management plans, and trainings goes with this. So I think it has been a starter for some of us. It can be a way to confirm the way we work, but also we have to keep this in mind for more than a year ahead, we will have to think about distant learning as a possible shift. If we get used to it, we can shift any moment, and that can be good.
Thank you, Cecile. I'm conscious we're running out of time, and I just want to get Katrine's views on the current crisis and her thoughts about it in relation to the Danish programme and open science skilling.
Yeah, I don't know how much I can add because I actually agree with both Jonathan. But well, anyway, due to our project that it was coming to an end, I don't think we changed much. The training catalog was always meant to be sum up some of the online courses and e-learning webinars and stuff like this. So we had some workshops and the development program, but it was always meant to be something that others could take up on their own. And whether or not we will do workshops in the future, I don't know. But I guess if we will open up at some time and some point, and we will do that. But so due to the project outcomes, we didn't change anything due to the current situation. There was only one workshop we couldn't go forward with, that we had to cancel. But I do think it's an eye-opener on how can we in the future do a lot more online training and the benefits of not having to be physical together in a room to do training. But if the society opens up at some point, I believe that we will meet, because I think it's in the human nature to do that. Yeah.
Yes, I agree. Thank you, Katrine. And yes, I think it is an eye-opener for me. It's an eye-opener in terms of when there's an emergency, our motivation to upskill goes through the roof. We've all upskilled so much in digital skills and video conferencing and web skills and so forth so quickly. So I think that we are coming to the end of this webinar. Our time is nearly up. I would like to thank our speakers for giving us great insights into the wonderful work that you've done. So thank you very much, Cecile, Katrine, and Jonathan. And my thanks to all of the attendees. I think we had 110 participants for listening in and giving great questions. A reminder that the case studies have been published on Zenodo, and they provide a wealth of information on a range of different approaches to open science skilling across Europe. I'd encourage attendees to discover them and hopefully gain ideas and inspiration for developing open science skilling initiatives in your own organisations. I wish you and your families all the best wherever you are in the world, and I hope that you are all well in these very uncertain times. So thank you all, and goodbye.
Thank you so much. Bye.